Hello? Okay, it does work. How is everyone doing today? It feels so good. I'm so excited to see the melanin. So let's do a roll call. Clap if you identify as a nerd. Clap if you identify as a book nerd. Clap if you identify as a comic book nerd. Clap if you identify as a film nerd. Yay! Okay. Should we do a quick mic check? Just like go down and say hello.
1 2 1 2.
1 2 1 2. Hello.
Hey.
Hi. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, I feel like we're winning. So Erika and I are going to do a quick context for the panel. She's out there screaming women and the new golden age of Black horror.
Even the slides are scary.
Okay. We're here. So she's out there screaming, women in the new golden age of Black horror. So there are a couple premises in this, that we are currently in a new golden age of Black horror, and that Black women in particular are playing a lead in this. As you can imagine, the title was inspired by the anthology by Jordan Peele, Out There Screaming.
All right, defining the new golden age of Black horror. So, we've kind of seen aspects of Black horror through the past 50 years or so, but what makes the difference now? Like, why are there so many upcoming stories written by Black authors, especially Black marginalized authors who are centering characters that aren't often the heroes or the one that survived the most? So we're going to talk about Black horror right now and how that looks and what the future of Black horror holds for not just the literary landscape, but for creatives everywhere.
Agreed. Yes, whoever applauded, thank you. So, so when you talk about Black horror, for Erika and I, it's starting with the rise of Black women horror writers. So we have Tracy Batist and Zen E Rocklin on the panel today, and Jasmine Joiner. But we also have to acknowledge that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So I talk about Octavia Butler. I say the name about 10 times a day. It's like a mantra. Like, what would Octavia Butler do today? What would Octavia Butler eat for breakfast? And then also, when you talk about Black horror, you also have to mention Tannery Dew, who I like to, hey, go Tannery Dew, who I like to think of as the queen of Black horror.
Okay, so the rise of Black women horror writers. So I guess we can start off with asking everyone where and how did they come across horror, and when did you realize that horror is definitely your jam? Anybody can go first.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. My brother is 8.5 years older than me.
Introduce yourself first.
Oh, sorry. I'm Zen E Rocklin.
Author
of Flowers for the Sea. And my brother is 8.5 years older than me, so he made it his job to try to traumatize me. And the first thing that he exposed me to was Nightmare on Elm Street. And I laughed, actually. I laughed at, there was the scene where he's in the alleyway and his arms extend. Oh, it's hilarious. And something about the thrill of it, about the the underlying theory that anyone could survive. Unfortunately, as evidence shows, for a long time we weren't surviving, but the reality is we are the survivors. And I wanted to, it was similar to Octavia Butler in the sense of watching The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, where it was, I could do better than this, so.
I'm Jasmine Joiner. I'm author of Devour, and and horror. So The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. That's the movie that all the practical effects and the gooiness and the screaming. I thought it was kind of funny because everyone was irrational and screaming at each other. That and Alien and just all of those films, but after a while you do realize that we don't survive until Alien versus Predator. Sanaa Lathan, the only black final girl I have to mention. Shout out to Sanaa. But yes, I just saw that and I was like, we could do this. We experience horrors all the time. We should be able to tell these stories and see ourselves in these stories. So yeah, that also inspired me. And then Octavia Butler, who looked at things and was like, why aren't we in space? Did just black people stop existing after a while? And it was like, no. So yeah, I just wanted to see us out there.
Hey, I am Ashlee Blackwell. I started Graveyard Shift Sisters, which is like a website about black women in horror. It's started in October 2013, and I'm also the co-writer and co-producer of Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. I worked very, very closely with Tanana Reevdu and Dr. Robin R. Means Coleman on that project, so check it out if you haven't already. It's easy for me. I was about 7, 8 years old. You know how sometimes they'll syndicate horror films on television. So my first horror film was A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And it was the first time I saw a black girl who was brown and who had glasses and who looked like me. And so that kind of started me on this journey of trying to find us in spaces, in horror in particular. And every now and then you can find a survivor here and there. There's Roger in Night of the Demons, obviously Keith David in The Thing. So we're there. Sometimes we survive, and most of the times we don't. But my primary focus as an academic, I'm also a film professor at St. Joseph's University. So anytime I get to throw horror in the mix with my students, I do, and especially talking about black women in the space.
Hi, I'm Tracy Batist. I write for kids, mostly. And my introduction into horror was not anything that I thought of as horror. It was actually a real surprise to me when people started considering one of my books, The Jumpies, horror, because it was just the stuff that I grew up with. So I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and in Trinidad there are these creatures called jumpies, right? They will come out and they will menace you at night. If you're a small child, they will eat you, they will drag you into the forest, you will never be seen again. It'll make your feet turn backward, all kinds of horrible, terrible, just gross things. But I loved these stories when I was a kid. I was like, yes, please tell me more about these creatures. And also, people would talk about jumpies like they could literally be anybody. So walking down the street, I could be walking around and seeing a jumpy, and I thought this was great. I just didn't, so it was a real shock to me when people were like, oh yeah, you're writing horror for children. I was just like, no, it's just regular stuff. And they're like, but you're scaring children. And I'm like, sorry?
I love it. Thank you, Tracy. This is the best audience ever. I am Isis Asare. I'm CEO and founder of Sister Sci-Fi, and I get to be your cruise director for about the next 40 to 50 minutes. The next slide. So we will talk a lot about Black women in horror, particularly in the literature space, but there's also Black women in horror doing amazing things in film and television. So if we're talking about Misha Green with Lovecraft Country, or the nanny, or the other Black girl, the adaptation, and the book, the list goes on and on and on.
All right, I guess I want to ask everyone, do you remember or do you have a timeline of like the first horror you saw or read that censored Black people? I was thinking about this myself, and the first thing I came up with was Michael Jackson Thriller, because that scared the crap out of me, but I kept watching it because it was so addictive. So I want to ask everybody the timeline of when you was like, okay, this is the first horror I see with Black people censored in it.
I'm gonna start with there's a book by, I want to say the last name is Delissa, but it's called Escape to Last Man Peak. It's a Jamaican book. It's a middle grade book, and I read it in school. It was like required reading for me at school. But I think growing up in the Caribbean, because there was no need to specifically to center Black people, because Black people, that's what we had. Like they were the business people. They owned all the stuff. They were in the government and whatnot. So I grew up with a lot of Black and brown literature, just because that's what they was, but that's what there was available. But I do remember Escape to Last Man Peak, which was about these kids who were off on their own and had to survive. And that is one of the absolute first it was not exactly horror, but felt like a really scary adventure for kids that I read when I was probably 9 or 10 years old.
So centering. Another fantastic survivor is Jada Pinkett Smith in Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Knight. I was so thankful to meet Ernest Dickerson and tell him that's one of my favorite movies ever, because he really took on a leadership and creative role in making sure that Jada Pinkett was the main actress. They originally wanted Cameron Diaz, and I've written papers about this. I've done a video essay about this movie because it's so fantastic, because it's incredibly nuanced. You have a character who you don't think she's going to survive, who is seen as really lesser than less because she's an ex-con and she's trapped in this, secluded New Mexico town, and no one thinks she's going to be the survivor. And even CCH Pounder's character in that film is so fantastic too, as this, she takes on this other mother role for her, and you see those two Black women supporting each other in a horror film, in a mainstream horror film. I'd never seen anything like it before, and it's really, really fantastic. And I would encourage all of us, I would even go back and watch it tonight if I get a chance to really look at the relationship between these two Black women in this horror film, because it's really great. Even though Jada Pinkett's the only one who survives, there's still two Black women in a horror film nurturing each other, and I had never seen that before, pre-1995. And so we're starting to kind of see a little bit more of that, and I hope so, but that's the first time I've ever seen anything like that.
So I grew up in the suburbs in Southern California, and I watched a lot of Disney Channel. I'm just gonna put that out there. Just want you all to know. This is where this is going. And I watched Don't Look Under the Bed, or Don't. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Ahura, you got me. Thank you. Don't Look Under the Bed. And he was the Black actor was the boogeyman, and he was turning into the boogeyman, and he became horrifying. And I was like, I've never seen a Black person first starring in a Disney original Saturday movie, and second, it's a horror movie on the Disney Channel. This is crazy. So that's my really first introduction. I was like, I like this. Are there more Black people in horror movies? And then I asked my mom, who's a huge cinephile, and she was like, I got you, I'll make a list. So she made a list, and we would watch all these horror movies while she braided my hair, because you have 3 hours. And she picks some, and then I pick one. She picks 2, I pick 1. And that's my horror movie education. But it started with the Are You Afraid of the Dark, or Under the Bed. What is it? I don't remember the title, but it's Don't Look Under the Bed. Thank you. Thank you. But yes, Disney. Shout out, sorry.
I agree with Erika. My first exposure as far as seeing horror-centered Black people was the Thriller video. But the first one that really affected me was Candyman. Mostly because Tony Todd looks like my Uncle Kenneth. And Uncle Kenneth scared the shit out of me. But it was the first time that I saw the sophisticated villain. It was strategic. It wasn't just, hey, yo, what's up? That obviously written by a white dude who's never been to a hood in his life. And I remember reading, I had to hunt down the short story by Clive Barker because I was determined, and only to find out that it was about a white dude. And I was like, what is this? And threw it out. But the rewrite that Clive did, Clive is a little bit problematic with his Black characters, but the rewrite that he did, he was insistent on creating a very complex villain, a Black villain that was not entirely relatable, but someone that you could understand his motivation, sympathetic. So Candyman was definitely traumatizing.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because ISIS created this timeline of some notable Black horror content, and I want everybody to take a look at it, and Isis is going to walk us through some of this, and I will add on to, at least as long as I've been alive as a cultural journalist, how, horror is being perceived in media.
Thank you, Erika. So sometimes when we see a cultural movement like Afrofuturism or Black horror, we like to think of it started today. So with this timeline, I want to say one of the earliest examples I can think of published Black horror was in 1902 to 1903. Pauline Hopkinson published Of One Blood, which was a spooky, mystical, which I will classify as horror, that was published as a serial in a publication and then later published as a novella. We have the 1922 Oscar Michel's The Dungeon, which was talked about in horror noir, which is one of the first examples of a Black horror movie being in movie theaters. That film is lost, so if you ever have the opportunity, you're like, oh, I came across this movie, watch it, enjoy it, and tell the rest of the world about it. We have 1972 Blacula, which I'm sure we all know about. The fun fact about Blacula, according to my research, I'm not an academic, so please correct me, is that Blacula was actually the film that sparked off the Blaxploitation movement. In 2001, we had the first African-American person to win the Bram Stoker's Award for their collection of horror poems. And then I end with Get Out and The Other Black Girl.
So as a cultural journalist, I have to sometimes review books and film and TV shows. And I would say prominently since Get Out, there has been this need to kind of decipher Black horror outside of the white imagination, which sometimes falls short depending on who's writing it. I would say, but what really pushed cultural journalism in horror, especially with non-white horror, I would say is Lovecraft Country. I believe there was think pieces every single day. You could not go on the internet without a think piece about Lovecraft Country. And I think for a lot of people, especially with Black authors, I find that a lot of historical events sometimes are kind of like dripped into our storytelling just naturally, because there's a lot of things that people just don't know. And when it finally reaches the masses, there's ongoing conversations about race and class and gender. So I, want to start off by asking everyone on the panel, why do you think it's important in Black horror specifically to censor not just Blackness, but marginalized gendered people in horror?
I do not aim to offend anyone, but because white Christianity is not the center of the universe. And a lot of the restrictions that have been put on gender and gender expression really started from there. I think a lot of it has to do with if I'm not free, we all ain't free, that kind of a thing, where we have to consider that it's not about a seat at the table, it's about destroying the table. So in order to do that, we have to be inclusive of all marginalizations. There is a specificity in anti-Blackness that has to be addressed and has to be looked at. But I think that white Christianity kind of broke apart the stronghold that we had on accepting variations within ourselves. Yeah.
I don't know, to just show another aspect of life. Like, we see the same horror movie over and over, like literally, like you'll see 15 Saw movies, 15 Final Destination movies, and eventually it's like there's more than just this white-centered horror. There's more cultural stories, there's more interesting things. Like, I was reading Master of Jinn, which I don't know, it's by P. Djeli Clark, and it is kind of scary yeah. And it's just so wonderful how that book is not centered on any type of whiteness. It's the Middle Eastern Blackness, like the whole amalgamation. And these whole different worlds open up because you just focus the narrative on someone new. Like, the lead is a queer Middle Eastern woman, and it's just so good. And I feel like we lose all those stories and all those recipes if we just completely focus on whiteness and center whiteness. I just think, like you said, no one's free if we're not all free, and we all should embrace all of the stories.
Sorry. I'm fine. Yeah, no, I would say the same. I don't have a long answer. Just I've always found Black horror interesting because they're telling stories that you haven't seen in horror films before, basically. And it's also Black people taking back the narrative from like that white racist imagination in Hollywood and reclaiming our stories and telling, especially when we talk about this African spirituality, telling stories about both. I've seen two things happen. Is seen spirituality used as a tool for healing and as a tool for revenge and retribution, especially for wrongdoing. So that's what I'm enjoying about Black horror.
I mean, yes to absolutely all of it. I think there just has not been that opportunity. Like now, there is vastly more opportunity for Black writers to be on the forefront, to get the kind of financial backing that they need to be able to tell the stories that they want to tell. I feel like the reason that there's been like a million Saw movies or whatever is because like you've used up all your ideas, right? But you haven't seen it from another perspective, which is what's happening now. Like people, I remember a few years ago in the children's book industry that they were saying like, no more vampire stories and no more cat stories and no more zombie stories. so I started writing this cartoon, this sort of like, I started drawing, and I can't draw. Like I started hand drawing this horrible cartoon called The Vampire Zombie Cat. Because I was like, well, no, like I haven't had a vampire story, and I haven't had a cat story, and I haven't had a zombie story, right? Like, we have not had this opportunity that everybody else has had all of the things, and they've had all the tropes, and they've had all the chances. And now we have it, and they're going to be different because we have a completely different take on all of these things. And the reason that they are doing really well is because it is not the same stuff. Even if it feels like, oh yes, maybe it's vampires, or yes, it's like demon slayers, like Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer out in the front. Did you guys see that book? Pick that up. I mean, this is different because it comes from a very different perspective. It comes from people who are bringing their whole selves and their whole history that has been largely ignored into horror now. And so the stories feel completely different, completely fresh, because they have been ignored for all of this time and nobody's seen anything like it. And I think that's why it's coming out now, because there is much more opportunity. And the fact is, people want to make money, right? And so the powers that be now realize, well, oh, right, yes, we can make some cash on this. So yes, let us be diverse. Because diversity is as green as my money. And that's what they're doing. So yeah, let's all take advantage of it, because yeah, if they're gonna throw money behind it now, let's see how long it lasts, because as we all know, tides love to turn. But yeah, bring it all out, bring it out.
Agreed. The opportunity, the tide, and bringing it out. I'm here for all of it. This is me and this clicker. Okay, awesome. So we're about to launch into the meat of the discussion, but afterwards, if you're looking for more resources, here's a list. So the first one on the list is Horror Noir, both the book and the documentary. The documentary streams, I think, currently on Amazon Prime Video. Out There Screaming.
Shudder. Oh, I'm sorry.
On Shudder, sorry, on Shudder. Thank you for the correction. Out There Screaming, an anthology of Black horror, curated, edited by Jordan Peele, and includes stories by N.K. Jemisin and Tiana Reid. The Black Guy Dies First, which is a review of tropes around Black people in cinema. And The Black Girl Survives in this one, which is an anthology of short stories centering Black women that published earlier this month?
Yes, a couple weeks ago.
Thank you. So these are our panelists, their social media handles, and for Erika and I as well. So the first question will go to you, Ashlee. We've been talking about this new golden age of Black horror. How would you define that?
I'm an academic, so I think in bullet points. So basically, work, created solely by Black creatives that center stories that have centralized Black characters and themes, varying themes that are disproportionate concerns and issues that affect Black people. That's how I would pretty much define it. And that is they're just putting it on an artistic stage, whether that's film, television, novels, comics, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else wants to chime in? I'm gonna ask a question for everybody. So with your art, your books, your comics, your films, where do you see yourself in this, renaissance of Black horror? Like, where do you feel like you fit in this puzzle?
I mean, I hope I'm a part of it. I come from the corner of horror that that has been popularized specifically by H.P. Lovecraft, which is cosmic horror, as well as, which is also kind of like Hellraiser as well, like Clive Barker and such. So I definitely approach horror in a way that is very much a big middle finger to the predecessors in that arena. So I'm kind of the loud, braggadocious, like, yeah, I'm black, blackity black, black, black. And I'm taking your stuff and I'm writing it better. So that's where I kind of see myself.
All right, I'm in comics, and I've been working in comics for 10 years, and comics is very white. So white. And horror comics are also that. So, and you don't see a lot of Black female protagonists, you don't see Black stories, Black spirituality that isn't used in a negative connotation. So I wanted to flip that. I have my book Devour, has a Black female protagonist. She's using root work and spirituality to help defend her family, and it's showing the positivity while giving a history lesson on root work and all of the spirituality that comes with that, instead of making it like voodoo, which voodoo isn't bad, it's just a closed practice though. You gotta be invited to, like, don't just do voodoo or else, good luck. But it explains the difference between hoodoo and voodoo. It's just like, I wanted to create a space where we can be celebrated, but also, and defeat the villain, but also deal with really scary, terrifying things, which is a Nancy going crazy and trying to eat you like 1,000 spiders. Yeah, so you can read that if you want.
I'm here for your babies. I take them. Okay, I will take them. I'm here for your littles. I am writing about creatures from specifically like Caribbean and West African mythologies, like these creatures that come out in the dark and they're like weird and they are, like they're in all of those oral stories that everybody has been telling forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, but have never been made it into books. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to indoctrinate your children early, hard, and I'm trying to make it so that it becomes core memories, so that they stay with me forever. You're welcome.
Drops mics and walks off stage. So Tracy, this question is for you. So Erika and I absolutely love the Jumbies. And as you said earlier, it takes its inspiration from Caribbean lore. What framework do you use to make horror accessible to our youngest readers? Writing scary stories for littles definitely requires a certain kind of sensibility. I do like to say I go hard, but I do actually have to go soft. I generally start trying to push things as far as I think I can push them, and usually it's my editor who then makes me aware of certain things in places where I can pull back. But I am talking about all of the things that I think Black horror does. So in the Jumbies, I'm talking about indigenous people who have been marginalized. That's really largely what the Jumbies is about. Like the Jumbies were there first, and then these people came, and then I'm really talking about colonialism. Like, kids don't know that that's what I'm talking about, but it really is what I'm talking about. In Rise of the Jumbies, where we have like Mama Jlo and the mermaids and whatnot, I'm talking about the Middle Passage. I'm talking about how people were dragged across the Atlantic and lost who they were.
And these are really very big ideas and big concepts. But I think what I do is that I am couching it in this adventure so that kids are more focused on the adventure and what happens to the people in this adventure. So the deeper meaning that I'm giving them in this story is something that if they're not really quite ready for it, it's easy for them to gloss over. Whereas if an adult is reading it, they will immediately get these deeper meanings. But also so that when a kid comes back to it later on, they will realize that there's a lot of things that are packed in there, right? I'm a teacher, I was a trained teacher, and so I feel like I'm always playing a long game when I'm writing books for kids. Like I'm giving them stuff that maybe they're not gonna get right away, that they will get later on. But yeah, I don't really shy away from the harder concepts when I'm doing it. It's just a matter of how to gauge how much I put in as opposed to how much of the adventure and funny and stuff that I put in as well. Like I have to make sure that it is well embedded into other things so that it would be really easy for a kid to skim over certain things and then come back to it later when they're able to, or when their adult is ready to, have that kind of conversation with them, or if they ask a question like, why do the mermaids not know who they were? Like, what is it? Why are they so disconnected from where they were in West Africa? Like, what's that about? And then an adult can have a conversation with them about exactly what that is and what that means. But yeah, it's always like this sort of balancing act to make sure that kids are not getting this, it is not horror upon horror upon horror, that it's like this horrible thing, but then it immediately goes to this adventure place or this loving place or this funny place. So it is this constant balancing act when you're writing for younger guys.
I love that.
You know what? Since you've talked about Caribbean folklore, I would like to ask you, Jasmine, since your Devour is coming out May 6th? 7th, okay, sorry.
Yes, I know you're from.
You use some African folklore a little bit in your graphic novel. How did you go about doing like the research for that, and what made you want to extract some of that into your work? And how do you differentiate your retelling of Anansi versus what's already out there and what people know about it?
Okay, so the first question was, sorry, I forgot.
How did you come about using African folklore in your graphic novel?
Oh, okay. So I was walking with John Jennings. He was walking me. I used to own a comic book shop in Southern California, and John Jennings was my neighbor, and I was dog sitting his dog Teddy, very adorable. And he's walking me home. Don't shake your head at me. He's walking at home, and we were talking about Anansi and folklore, and he was like, wouldn't it be cool if Anansi was like deranged, like a villain? Because you always see him as like a trickster, and he's like he's not harm, he doesn't cause any harm, he's just playing all these tricks. And I was like, that'd be interesting. And that was it. And then a couple weeks later, I was like, I wrote a short story. You want to read it? You want to read this thing? And it was about Anansi coming over on the ships with the enslaved people because he wanted to go on an adventure and learn their stories because he loves stories. But then the stories he learned drove him crazy, made him deranged. And so what he thought he could do to help was to take all those memories from them, to take those stories from them. But he took them on, and it slowly made him more mad, and he just started devouring people. And so that's where the book Devour kind of came from. And the research for that was just a lot of reading and a lot of like all the folk tales and the traditions, the Ghanaian stories and the West African stories, and just reading all those traditions and then also researching root work and hoodoo and like all of these things to build a story around this. And the way he's different from like American Gods, like Orlando Jones' depiction, Orlando is, when I see Anansi in my head, it is Orlando Jones. So it's different as in it's not Neil Gaiman writing him. I wrote it, but in my head it is Orlando Jones. So he's not too different. But in other ways, he's like a tragic figure in my story. He's more like, oh no, like he's not as jolly as he is in the other stories, and he's carrying the weight and the burden of all those years of enslavement on his brain. So yeah, the book comes out May 7th, but you can get it today at the Schomburg shop after this, because I'll be doing a signing for that, So yeah, come by, and it's my birthday, so you know. Thought I could just like guilt you with that too.
Happy birthday, Jasmine. Thank you. Okay. Yes. And Orlando Bloom as Anansi was absolutely everything, so I'm here for it.
Jones, and yes, he was everything.
I'm sorry, I've been messing up last names all day.
It's all good. We get
Orlando
it.
Jones,
We got
sorry.
you.
Yes,
He's
yeah.
so good.
And I appreciate all the corrections. So Zen, this question is for you. So Flowers for the Sea, which was the winner of the Shirley Jackson Award for Best Horror, is a discusses a lot of themes, and it was terrifying. Like I had chills reading it. But for me, a big theme was like reproductive agency. How did you come about like that topic, and what work do you feel like Flowers for the Sea is in conversation with?
I always write my own fears. I exercise my fears through writing. Y'all are my therapists. Thank you. But pregnancy is something that we take for granted. This is a being that will literally suck the calcium from your teeth if you don't give it enough nutrients. What, bro? And I'm supposed to just do this? Nah. So that was my number one reason for writing it, to be honest. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Court. It had nothing to do with pink pussy hats. Oh, sorry, is there children? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, with pink hats. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with my own personal fear of pregnancy and giving birth. My mother loves to tell me how she had to get a 4-way episiotomy on me. Yeah, and she didn't do any drugs, at least not those drugs. But so to me, it's the downplay of what is considered the, again, white Christian assignment of what is considered women's roles. It's a pain in the ass to do laundry. It sucks to do dishes. It sucks to mop. But we think of it as female role things to do, just like giving birth, and 6 weeks later, you're supposed to be back at work. I just shoved a watermelon through a lemon, bro. Like, what? So I think even though it does come into conversation with the Supreme Court and with the pink hats and things of that sort, it was a battle cry for the poor, mostly. It was about no matter what you do, no matter the restrictions you place, no matter how strategic your dumbing down of America is, we will find a way to fight back. And, sorry, it was like, I actually did not know about, even though I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey. I had some teachers that were like, you know what, forget the curriculum, we're teaching off curriculum right now. But I still didn't know about Reconstruction until I saw the most racist film on celluloid, which is Birth of a Nation. I sat through 3.5 hours of this stupid thing to find out that we were actually in Congress, that we were represented, that 1921 Tulsa happened, things of that sort. Like, I did not know until I saw the most racist film on celluloid, and that's what made me start digging. And I went to a state school for college. So again, it was a rallying cry for the poor, for the downtrodden, for the 98% of this country, and 98% of this world. Again, no matter what restrictions, no matter what you try to pass into law, into bills, we will find a way to fight back.
Wow. You said a mouthful. Well, going into that, this is for everybody on the panel. Are there any traumas or tropes you want to avoid in your writing, or that you're not interested in exploring? I know for you, like you talk about, birth and pregnancy, which is scary as hell. But, for some people, that might be traumatizing to enough where they can't really read your work, no matter how beautiful it is, but because it's just so traumatizing, it just hits really hard. So I just wanted to know, are there any themes or tropes that, you're not really ready to explore as an individual, as an author, as a writer, or a creative? Nothing's off limits?
Nah,
Yeah.
to be frank.
Yeah, everything's up for grabs.
Yeah.
Really? Like, absolutely everything?
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about, slavery, enslaved people, being drowned, for children. So I feel like, yeah, I'm good.
Well, how do you, and I love this, but like, how do you navigate like sexual assault and stuff like that? Like, or how would you, because that can be triggering and heavy.
Absolutely. It's absolutely triggering. I think it's something that is not explored by women, especially Black women, as much as it should be. Because again, the idea of sexual assault and whatnot is downplayed so much that even male victims don't come forward. Because of the patriarchy, because of this toxic masculinity, there is this idea of being taken advantage of. And why weren't you man enough to not be taken advantage of? So I think it's something that it's a dirty little secret, because we're still, as a survivor myself, it's something that has to be, the reality and the cruelty of it needs to be explored in the sense of not the act itself, but what happens afterwards, and how it impacts the rest of your life. And that is something that is not given respect to as much, because we're told to get over it. You have support groups. Just go to your support group. And it's like, no, like every day I'm walking with keys in my fingers. So it's something that needs to definitely be explored. Sorry for the shaking. But it needs to be explored in a way that makes it plain that this is trauma.
I have written about this for kids, but for older kids. So in the Black Enough anthology, I have a piece called Gravity, and it really is about, it's called Gravity because the entire story takes place in the couple of seconds it takes for a girl to jump and land back down. The entire story takes place in that time, and it's that time of somebody like inappropriately grabbing her. But the gravity is that she's trying to consider how she's going to respond to it, how it's going to affect her, how people are now going to see her. Even though she's not the one who's doing anything, like she's considering all of those things. Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, this is also one of those things that we can and should be talking about, because for the simple reason that it doesn't get talked about enough.
Thank you for that those thoughtful responses. So I'll move on to the next question. So we've aligned on we're on a new golden age of Black horror. How has that impacted the reception of your work? And that's a question for all of y'all.
So far, it's the same stuff, different day. I still get, I introduced myself to, this is an older white guy, and I said, I'm an author. He's like, oh, that's awesome. What do you write? I said, horror. He said, oh. And I've had I've been in writing groups where I've been told I'm too good a writer to write genre. Because there is this kind of looking down on genre and thinking that genre is not as good as literary, which, to be real, how many times can we read about a divorced dude who's a professor sleeping with a student? Come on. But genre is looked down upon, so it's still, even though there is this renaissance happening and there are those that are in the literary field that are looking over at genre a little bit more and experimenting with genre because they see it as a cash cow, there's still the kind of disrespect that if you lead with it, no, I write horror. I don't write horror elements, I write horror. There's still the disrespect, so.
Yeah, I feel that too. The disrespect, and because I also write science fiction, and I said that in a writing class once, and that did not go over well. Our professor was like, what do you mean, sci-fi? There's no, what are you talking about? I was like, space. And he was like, no, we don't do space in this class. I was like, oh my God. So, yeah, that's hard, and I also write comics, which also gets that same vibe. Comics aren't serious literature, even though with, the MCU and all that is bringing more highlight to that, it's giving a little more respect of what's going on in comics and the work that's happening there. But I feel like the golden age of Black horror just kind of opened more doors for me, so people will actually start to read what I'm writing, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, and just comics are actually getting, this part of comics, horror comics are getting more eyes on it, which is actually pretty exciting.
Do you have anything to add, Ashlee?
Yeah, I'm not a creator in this particular sense, but I talk to a lot of creatives, and my frustration as a scholar who wants to kind of preserve this history, especially with the women who are filmmakers in particular, is there's not enough of them getting opportunities for their original ideas for a mainstream audience. Also, I gotta be honest, it's nice that you get something, that somebody gets an Amazon Prime deal or a Netflix deal, but then is this gonna be on DVD or Blu-ray? So we have it, so I can hold it in my hand and really preserve it and make sure this stuff doesn't get erased, because it can easily be taken away. So I don't really know what's going on, but I don't want to get too deep, because I'm still in this phase of the next step of what I really want to do with the work that I'm doing is take it to a space where I make sure that this history does not get forgotten, and that's why I started Graveyard Shift Sisters in the first place. So that's my goal.
This is not really my genre, so I feel like I know more about children's literature, so whatever they all said.
Cosign.
All right, we're about to wrap up so we can talk to the audience soon, but I wanted to know, what horror content are you all watching or reading or looking forward to? I know for me right now, I just finished Bumps in the Night by Amelia Howard. I am loving Philadelphia by Ronnie Barnes. And I am the biggest fangirl of Interview with the Vampire on AMC.
Well, right now, I'm looking forward to reading Tanana Reedu's new book, The Reformatory. Yeah, I'm gonna read that because, yes, but you gotta take your time when you approach her work because it's brutal, but I'm very excited about that. It's not Black, but I did start reading The Stand, yeah, Stephen King writing Black people is crazy. Just gotta gloss over those parts and just focus on the story because, my God, he tried and it didn't go well. No, it wasn't. So recommended so far, just glaze over the Black parts. It's like he's never seen a Black person before. What did you say? Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, he was talking about Black people in Times Square. I read it just before I came here, and I was like, that is the wildest thing I've ever. He used the word jive, and I'm glad I can talk about this with y'all because I was struggling. So I am reading The Stand. I've never read Stephen King before, so pray for me. And watching, I watch a lot of the same old movies. Like I'm watching, but I did read, we were talking about horror and how horror tells our stories in different ways. And I was thinking of Watchmen, how HBO's Watchmen how that became way better when it was focused on the Tulsa massacre and it was focused on with a Black lens. It's way better than the comic. It's just art. So yes, it's way better than the original. So you don't even have to read that. Just watch the HBO. Regina King is everything. And I'm just fangirling. Y'all are just here and I just wanted to talk to you about my favorite things. So that's all. But yes, watch those things.
Regina King is doing an adaptation of Bitterroot, which I'm very excited about. Yeah.
Okay, so if you haven't already, please see Mariama Diallo's Master. It's on Amazon Prime. It's one of the best horror films made since Get Out. I said it, and I mean it. It's so good. Anything else that she does next is going to be amazing. She's a master class in creating horror, especially horror centering Black women. I love her work. I can't wait to write more about it. She's amazing. Even her short film, Hair Wolf, is really great. There's dozens of Black women who are creating horror. Check out short films, go to your Vimeo, go to YouTube, check out England Simpson, who did a film about, and she's an actress herself, so she did a film about a Black woman serial killer that she stars in. Who else? Oh my gosh. Jasmine J. Johnson. She's a newer filmmaker out of my alma mater, Temple University. She did a film called Inner Demons, which is a film centering Black women in psychological horror. Oh my God, there's just so many. Arshanae Williams, her short films are online. Paralysis is another great psychological thriller film. I would just, it's the women who are, they're not quite at the precipice of like Hollywood, but they're starting with these really fantastic short films that are concepts for grander ideas. Zondesha Brown is another great filmmaker. Her film, Blood Runs Down, is online. Please check it out. It's amazing. It's about intergenerational trauma in regards to Black women in the American South. It's so good. So those are the women I'm excited about the work that they have done and that they're going to do in the future.
And just to confirm, Ashlee, are these recommendations on Graveyard Sisters, on your social media? Like, it was a lot, and I was like...
Yeah, it's... some of them are kind of listed in the Black women horror filmmakers space, so that's where you can like find their names and their work, and then also I've interviewed a few of them, so some of those are in like the blog archives, but yeah, just a simple Google search. But yeah, Mariama Diallo, you can just find her straight up on Amazon.
I've been reading just a few things in the kidlit space, and so Eden Royce has a new a new book coming out, The Creeping of Dogwood House. I feel like I think Ron, author of Hoodoo, has something else coming out soon. I'm just like trying to flip through like my memory, which is not great because my memory is terrible because, you know, I write things. I'm an author because I need to write things down because my memory is terrible. But yeah, you know, so definitely Eden Royce's book. If you haven't seen Root Magic or read Root Magic, definitely go and find those. I will have to think about it, but you know what? I will put it on my Instagram if I think about more things for you guys.
Awesome.
I have one comic recommendation or two that I know that are here today. Black Jose Press has a new magazine called Gladius Magazine, and in there, Sam Wade has a horror comic about pregnancy. And it's like Alien, so if anybody remembers the Chest Burster, you should check that out. And then like a lot of the Megascope titles too. Yeah, those are dope. So those comics and, you know, Batman.
Megascope is amazing, so agree.
I'm currently reading Lone Women by Victor LaValle, who is an excellent, excellent writer. As far as movies, I recently saw, this is not horror, but it is Horrific Circumstances, Monkey Man, Dev Patel. Yo, I live in Florida. Moment of silence. And like, I literally wept in that film because it's so beautiful. You have to check it out, Monkey Man.
Speaking of Victor LaValle, did you watch Changeling, the adaptation on Apple TV?
What's that?
Oh no, I haven't watched Changeling because Apple TV and I fight all the time, but we're gonna get it together. We're gonna watch it.
All right, do we have a few extra moments for questions?
Okay, great. So there are 2 microphones in the middle of the auditorium. If you have a question, you can go to the, okay, I see one person. Awesome.
Yeah. Hello? Hi. My question for the panel. So I have my own definitions, but I'm interested in your definition. What is the line between Black horror and Black trauma?
That is a damn good question.
I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear y'all's thoughts.
Because them is trauma.
I love that you didn't mention them, because I heard your list, and them didn't make it.
Yeah.
Them is straight up trauma because there's no wrap up to it. There's no circulation. There's no circulatory storytelling. It is all about how can we make our audience throw up. And it's done in a way that is a caricature of what truly happened to Black people, which pisses me off.
Yeah.
Because white people can sit there and watch it and absolve themselves. Oh, well, we didn't do that. Oh, well, that doesn't happen now. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
In its own way, it does. I haven't watched the second season. The line between trauma and horror is about what your victims go through and how what those events resolve to. If they don't resolve to anything, then it is trauma. Then it is splatterpunk, what is called splatterpunk in horror. And even in horror with splatterpunk, there is resolution. There is some kind of wrap up. There is some kind of comeuppance in a way of your villain. Them has no.
It's flat. It's very flat.
It's very flat. It's very flat. So as far as the line between trauma and horror, it is a thin one, especially with Black horror, but it is one that definitely the line needs to be towed, but not towed across to trauma, because you still want to get your point across.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you. That was an excellent question. I appreciate it.
How you doing? Thank you all for being here and all your wisdom and wise words. I'm curious to know how dealing with the publishing world and dealing with agents and agencies, how you've navigated the gatekeeping that goes on in the industry, and how you've pushed forward to get your work out there when others claim that there's no one for it to connect to.
I'm so sorry I'm talking so much, but that was a damn good question too. I yelled. I was fortunate to be able to go to a convention called ReaderCon, which is up in Boston, Massachusetts, or Quincy specifically. And they had a panel on writing strong women, and it was nothing but white women. And immediately, 15 minutes into the panel, I put my hand up and I waited. And I specifically called them out to tell them that everything that you're talking about is white women problems. Because when it comes to people of color and women of color, these things, talking about fighting crime in heels, what? So I yelled, and I was able to put myself in a position where I also got fired from my job because of racial issues. Basically, a white woman screamed at me. I screamed back and told her I'm not her child, don't yell at me. And I got in trouble, and I was let go. So it was a moment of me standing up for myself and losing my job. And I kind of came away with it like, now I don't care. I don't care about white people's feelings, because you hurt mine. You hurt my pocket. So I literally sat, speaking of Stephen King, one of his collaborators was Peter Straub. Peter Straub wrote Ghost Story and Talisman. And I sat with Peter Straub that year and said, you write terrible Black people. Because I just straight up had enough. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it takes a matter of either having the gall or finding someone that has the gall to yell for you, who believes in your work. Because I found an Asian American woman, Diana Pho, who literally was like, I love your message, I love what you have to say, you need to write. And I never took writing seriously before that. And I decided to sit down and write Flowers for the Sea. And she was the one that was like, she was navigating that industry for me. So it does take networking. It does take talking to people, which is hard for us creatives. But it definitely, it works out in the end because your voice matters.
I'm going to agree about building your team. Like, that really is the most important part of navigating the industry. The industry is still, I think, 85% white. That's like on the publishing side. I'm not talking about creatives here.
It's 79% now.
Oh, it's 79 now?
Yes.
Oh, it's come down. What's the rest? It's progress, you guys, progress. So my very first agent actually refused to send out what would then become the Jumbies book, and so I had to leave that agent to find somebody else. Because I didn't know it was going to be as popular as it became, but I knew it was the book that I wanted to write. And she, after sending it out to literally three editors, and all three of them coming back and saying that it was not ready yet. Not that it was terrible, but it was not ready yet. She refused to send it out anymore. So I left that agent, and then it took me a long time to find another agent. But then once I did, that book sold in like 2 or 3 weeks. So it really is about taking the time to find the right people to represent you, taking the time to find your team. And sometimes your team is not even going to be an editor or an agent. Sometimes your team is like your peers who are going to support you and help you to stay in it when you feel like, you know what, I don't know if I want to do this anymore and I want to quit. But yeah, you need to put in that time to like find your people.
Yes, we have a question in the back.
Yep, I think this is gonna be our last question.
Since you guys have read a lot of books, how many in your life have you guys read about? So you guys can learn all about that the books that have been sent, like, since all the books have you guys read it, how many guys did you guys write it in your kind of life?
That's a good question. Okay, so because I present to little guys like you, and thank you for that question, I actually do know because we've counted. So I have 26 books out. I have 2 more coming out this year. One is Moko Magic Carnival Chaos, which is about Moko jumbies and like West African creatures. And the other one is my first sci-fi. It's called Boy 2.0, which is about a boy who, it's like sort of like if you took Snow White and you flipped it over and you said if Snow White's mother was like a genetic engineer and she could make her child look like anything she wanted. And if she was black, like what would she make her child look like, right? So her child can like make himself invisible. So 28 as of October.
I've written 1 book, but I've also written like 5 zines. And I used to be a cultural journalist like yourself, and I've written at least 50 articles about various things. So thank you. That's awesome. That's a good question.
I have written several books. A lot of them are trash. Not even gonna lie.
That is not true.
Okay.
It's not.
I have 1 published, and I have another novella that I'm working on right now about sisters and witches. And then I have a short story collection coming out about Sin Eater. So I'll have 3 published. So.
I'm here for Sisters and Black Witches, so I'm very excited. I think this is time. Okay. This was amazing. Thank you so much. This is my first. This was my first Schaumburg Black Comic Con, so I'm so happy. So please, I want to give you a hand of applause, but it's just me, so that would be awkward. So if you could give yourself a round of applause, that would be awesome. Finally, let's give a stand, let's stomp, let's cheer for our amazing panelists. Being a creative is hard. Being a Black creative is a whole nother wahala. So I'm so deeply grateful for your talent. Can I do the Sister Sci-Fi call and response just once to close it out?
Sure.
Okay, so if I don't know how many of y'all have ever come to a Sister Sci-Fi virtual event, the way they typically end is I'll say, claim our magic, and y'all will respond, create our future. Erika and I will do a practice round. Okay. Claim our magic.
Claim our future.
Create our future, exactly. So we'll all do that, but I think we're at time. So we'll do it once. So I'll say, claim our magic, you'll respond back, create our future. Only if you want to, because consent is sexy. Okay. Claim our magic.
Create our future.
And we all say Ashe. Thank you so much.
Ashe.
Thank you.